abuse of young people by priests who are subsequently exonerated and protected by the Church. The accusation of child abuse against those who teach sex education projects the harm done by the Church onto those who are trying to teach how sex works, why consent is important, and what pathways for both gender and sexuality exist. This externalization of harm is but one example of how the phantasm of gender works. In various parts of the world, gender is figured not only as a threat to children, national security, or heterosexual marriage and the normative family, but also a plot by elites to impose their cultural values on real people, a scheme for colonizing the global South by the urban centers of the global North. It is portrayed as a set of ideas that are in opposition to either science or religion or both, or as a danger to civilization, a denial of nature, an attack on masculinity, or the effacement of the differences between the sexes. Gender is also sometimes regarded as a totalitarian threat or the work of the devil, and thus cast as the most destructive force in the world, a contemporary and dangerous rival to God that must be countered or destroyed at all costs. In the United States, at least, gender is no longer a mundane box to be checked on official forms, and surely not one of those obscure academic disciplines with no effect on the broader world. On the contrary, it has become a phantasm with destructive powers, one way of collecting and escalating multitudes of modern panics. Of course, there are many completely legitimate reasons to fear our world today. There is climate disaster, forced migration, lives imperiled and lost in war. There are neoliberal economies that are depriving people of basic social services they need to live and thrive. There is systemic racism that takes the lives of many through both slow and quick forms of violence. Women, queer people, and trans people, especially those who are Black or brown, are murdered at appalling rates. On the right, however, the list of fears is different. There are challenges to patriarchal power and social structures within the state, civil society, and the heteronormative family unit. Waves of migration that threaten traditional ideas of nationhood, white supremacy, and Christian nationalism. The list of what there is to fear goes on, but no list can explain how existing fears of destruction are exploited by right-wing movements, institutions, and states for their own aims, and how terms such as gender theory, systemic racism, or critical race theory are blamed for the very disorienting fears that many people across the world now feel about the future of their ways of life. For gender to be identified as a threat to all of life, civilization, society, thought, and the like, it has to gather up a wide range of fears and anxieties, no matter how they contradict one another, package them into a single bundle, and subsume them under a single name. As Freud taught us about dreams, whatever is happening in phantasms, such as these, involves the condensation of a number of elements and a displacement from what remains unseen or unnamed. Can we even say how many contemporary fears gather at the sight of gender, or explain how the demonization of gender deflects from and covers over legitimate anxieties about climate destruction, intensified economic precarity, war, environmental toxins, and police violence, fears we are surely right to feel and think about? When the word gender absorbs an array of fears and becomes a catch-all phantasm for the contemporary right, the various conditions that actually give rise to those fears lose their names. Gender both collects and incites those fears, keeping us from thinking more clearly about what there is to fear and how the currently imperiled sense of the world came about in the first place. Circulating the phantasm of gender is also one way for existing powers, states, churches,